From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. First, the headlines. Virginia goes red as Democrats hear five-alarm fire. Muslim Americans are more generous than overall U.S. population. More than 100 leaders at COP26 summit vowed to end deforestation by 2030. Squid Game-themed protesters play games in Glasgow. Prominent Islamic scholar sentenced to 6.5 years in Russian prison. Our top story tonight. Tuesday's elections in Virginia proved devastating for Democrats. The victory of Virginia Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin confirmed that the GOP can win without the influence of former President Donald Trump. Republicans are on track to win the state legislature as well. Vice President Kamala Harris, campaigning in Virginia, did not work to secure a victory for the Democrats. This is despite the fact that President Joe Biden won the state by 10 percentage points only a year ago. In New Jersey, which President Biden won by 16 points, the governor's election this week is too close to call. Virginia Democratic Senator Tim Kaine told CNN Wednesday that congressional Democrats are to blame for losing the Virginia governor's race as they failed to pass President Biden's agenda. Former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords is suing the NRA for making $35 million in illegal campaign contributions to Republican candidates. The Campaign Legal Center filed the suit Tuesday on behalf of Giffords. It alleges the gun lobby engaged in a scheme in violation of the Federal Election Campaign Act. The suit claims campaign contributions went to 7 federal candidates, including U.S. Senate hopefuls and Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. The U.S. District Court in Washington offered the Federal Election Commission, or FEC, on September 30th to act on the complaint within 30 days. Giffords then sued the NRA directly after the FEC failed to act. Giffords is a gun control advocate who served as a congresswoman from Arizona until January 2012. She resigned due to a severe brain injury suffered during a 2011 assassination attempt in Tucson. Muslim Americans are more philanthropic than the general population, a survey shows. It found on average Muslims gave $1,810 to faith-based causes compared to $1,138 given by non-Muslims. With secular causes, Muslims gave $1,400 compared to non-Muslims who donated $767. Muslims also gave more to overseas causes than domestic ones compared to non-Muslims, the study found. Over 85% of Muslim respondents said the donations were motivated by compassion toward people in need, compared to about 75% of non-Muslims. Also, 60% of Muslims cited tax deductions as a motivation, compared to 50% of non-Muslims. The online survey was sponsored by Islamic Relief USA and conducted by the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative of Indiana University, Purdue University. A second witness in a landmark lawsuit against organizers of a deadly 2017 white supremacist demonstration in Charlottesville, Virginia, took the stand on Monday. Defendants sought to discredit those hurt in the violence that engulfed the city during the Unite the Right rally. They tried to connect them with violent left-wing counter-protesters and communists. Defense counsel began cross-examination Monday of Devin Willis. In August 2017, Willis was an 18-year-old African-American student at the University of Virginia. He and another plaintiff, Natalie Romero, who testified on Friday, were the only people of color among a group of counter-protesters. They were surrounded by a torch-bearing mob as they linked arms around the statue of Thomas Jefferson on the university campus on August 11, 2017. Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen issued a stinging rebuke of Facebook's Meta rebrand on Monday. She called Facebook's ambitions to develop the Metaverse, a virtual reality internet, rather than fix existing problems, unconscionable. Facebook last month announced it will hire 10,000 new employees in Europe over the next 5 years to build a Metaverse. Haugen was speaking at the Web Summit Tech Conference in Lisbon, Portugal. She accused the company of yet again prioritizing expansion over people's safety. The former Facebook engineer leaked a trove of internal documents, sparking weeks of criticism of the social media giant. She also called for Facebook chairman and CEO Mark Zuckerberg to step down. Meanwhile, Facebook announced Tuesday it is shutting down its facial recognition system, including templates of more than 1 billion people. Virginia Commonwealth Attorney Buda Biberai has received death threats over her handling of a sexual assault case in Loudoun County. The threats come ahead of a close gubernatorial election in Virginia. Right-wing Republicans and media outlets have launched a disinformation campaign against Biberai about the school's sexual assault case. They falsely accuse her of bungling or attempting to cover up the crime and silencing the victim's father by having him arrested. They also claim she pocketed money from investor George Soros. Republican gubernatorial candidate and Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin has boosted those claims. In 2019, Bibarai became one of the first Muslims to be elected to public office in Virginia. She unseated a Republican incumbent to the race to become the Commonwealth's attorney. Hundreds of QAnon followers gathered in downtown Dallas on Tuesday, believing John F. Kennedy Jr., who died in a 1999 plane crash, would reappear. He did not. The Dallas Morning News reported several hundred QAnon conspiracy theorists converged on Dealey Plaza. That's where JFK Jr.'s father, President John F. Kennedy, was assassinated on November 22, 1963. According to QAnon postings, JFK Jr. was to emerge from hiding at 12:29 p.m. His appearance was somehow expected to lead to the reinstatement of Donald Trump as president. JFK Jr. died in July 1999 with his wife and sister-in-law while flying a private plane to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. In international news, world leaders on Tuesday pledged real action at the UN COP26 Climate Change Summit in Glasgow. They vowed to limit rising temperatures and help small island developing states, as well as countries in Africa, to adapt. More than 100 leaders committed to halting and reversing forest loss and land degradation by 2030. Their pledge is backed by $12 billion in public funding, as well as $7.2 billion in private funding. Canada, Russia, Brazil, China, Colombia, Indonesia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo endorsed the Glasgow Leaders' Declaration on Forest and Land Use. They pledged to support 85% of the world's forests, an area covering more than 13 million square miles. This region absorbs 1/3 of global carbon released from burning fossil fuels yearly. Rich nations' failure to meet a 2020 target for providing $100 billion a year in climate financing to developing countries has earned wide rebuke. But U.S. climate envoy John Kerry suggested the goal could be met by next year. Activists and protesters called on world leaders to fulfill their climate pledges using the theme of Squid Game during the UN Climate Summit in Glasgow this week. Squid Game is a South Korean dystopian show that became a global Netflix sensation. The climate conference will continue for another 2 weeks as leaders try to craft national plans for curbing the devastating impacts of global warming. Here, Fatima Ibrahim, co-director of Green New Deal Rising, talks about the protest.
So you see in Squid Games this critique of a system that really disadvantages the ordinary working person who's just trying to get by, and has real consequences when those in power play games with people's future. In the same way with the climate crisis, where you have world leaders playing games with our future by delaying action, and this new type of denialism which is delaying climate action, and people are dying because of that.
At least 25 people were killed and more than a dozen wounded in an attack on a military hospital in Afghanistan on Tuesday. No one has claimed responsibility for the gun and bomb assault in the center of the Afghan capital, Kabul. A suicide bomber detonated explosives near the entrance of the sprawling site. Gunmen then broke into the hospital grounds, firing their weapons. A Taliban spokesman blamed the group's hardline rivals, ISIS Khorasan, for the attack. Zabihullah Mujahid claimed Taliban forces had repulsed the attack within 15 minutes. A Russian court has sentenced a prominent Islamic scholar to 6.5 years in prison for running a branch of a banned religious group. Gabdakhamun Naumov was sentenced by a court in the Tatarstan region's capital Kazun. This was for leading the Islamic Noor movement, his lawyer Ruslan Nagiev told Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty's Russia service on Tuesday. The Tatarstan region is home to Turkic-speaking Tatars who have faced genocide in Russia and the former Soviet Union. Naumov is a teacher at the Russian Islamic University and former imam of a mosque in Kazun. The Noor movement was founded in Turkey by the late Islamic scholar Said Nursi. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September. I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. To discuss Tuesday's elections in detail, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Samana. Virginia loss to Republican Party has probably waken up the Democrats. They're worried about their act in the Congress, loss of Biden's agenda, and what's going to happen next year. Are they going to lose Congress, Senate, and House? Whole lot of questions, and Democrats will be talking about it for a while Republicans will be happy and learning what can they do to take over the country once again. That's called democracy. What is the key to this success for Republican? And why Democrats did so bad? To discuss all of that, we have with us Paul J. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Paul.
Thanks for inviting me.
Paul J. is a journalist, filmmaker, and a founder and host of the Analysis.News. Now, when Joan has declared it is a 5-alarm fire, do you agree with him?
Yeah, but the 5-alarm fire, the fire isn't the Republicans winning Virginia, or who knows, we'll see what happens in New Jersey. We should remember back in the last presidential election, even though Trump lost in many of these states, including Virginia, by what was it, more than 10 points, the Republican Party itself did quite well at state levels, legislature levels, governorships. So the base of the Republican Party, sections of it actually don't like Trump. But they remain within the realm of the ideology and politics of the Republican Party. So I think, first of all, that has to be understood. The second thing is that the Democratic Party is incapable of talking to and developing a strategy that might actually win in states that could go either Republican or Democrat, these kind of swing states. And Virginia, although recently has been more Democrat, it's still really fundamentally a swing state. The reason the Democrats don't know how to win is because I've been, some other people using this line, the Democratic or the corporate Democrats in any way, the establishment Democrats, are caught between a black rock and a hard place. Black rock being the big financial firm, and I use it as a symbol for Wall Street. And the hard place being the promises they make that they're not able to implement. either because of divisions in their own party or because their allegiance is more to the financial sector than in dealing with these problems. But there is one issue that the Democrats could win on, and I think probably could have won on in Virginia and New Jersey, and I think would be a game changer. And I'm not the only one that thinks this. The issue is climate. Before the last presidential election, early in the election, the Washington Post actually had an editorial where they said the wedge issue for the Democrats is should be climate change. And they went on to make the argument that that's the issue that could transcend the normal division between Republicans and Democrats. If you look at some of the Pew research on polling amongst Republicans, 10% of conservative Republicans consider the climate change or global warming or climate crisis as one of the most urgent issues to be dealt with. Now, amongst all the Republicans, 10% may not sound like much, but if you could pick up even half of that 10% in these states that are so close in the voting, it might make the difference between a win and a loss. If you go dig further into the Pew polling results, I think it's 37% of Republicans consider it a high priority, maybe not the highest, as in the 10%. So you got 47% of people that identify as conservative Republicans take the climate crisis very seriously, even if a majority of Republicans don't. But you don't need a majority of the Republicans. 90% of Democrats take the climate crisis seriously and think it's a very top issue. So just add a small percentage of those Republicans that actually agree on that issue. It's a serious wedge issue. But the Democrats don't really fight on that issue and because they won't really defy the fossil fuel industry. Because the fossil fuel industry isn't just the fossil fuel industry. If you look who owns the fossil fuel industry, it's mostly, guess who? Wall Street. It's the big financial institutions, which are the major backers of the Democratic Party. So the issue that could be a unifying issue, that could actually rally people towards an agenda that in fact is the most urgent issue facing us, the existential issue facing us, the establishment Democratic Party just won't go there. And instead they get this hack to run for governor, McAuliffe, who's, you can't get a more quintessential guy identified as a corporate Democrat. And then they play into the hands of the Republicans on some of the cultural issues. So the economy's not doing well. Biden is not very inspiring, to be polite, to be nice. So it's not a surprise.
So Virginia Democratic Senator Tim Kaine told CNN that it is the congressional Democrats who are fighting and not passing the Biden's agenda, which caused them the race in Virginia.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I mean, I can't say it's not a factor because it gives people the sense that not much is happening. Maybe it would affect the turnout, the enthusiasm of people who would have voted Democrat but didn't bother to vote at all. But that's not going to cut into the vote of any people that voted Republican or independents that wound up voting Republican. I don't think very much. And people understand. They're not stupid. They get it's Joe Manchin and a few of these conservative Democrats that are holding things up. So I don't think that's the explanation. The explanation is deeper than that. It's that the Democratic Party is trying to look like it's transformative, that it's progressive, it's going to change the lives of people. But because it's so intertwined with the financial sector and the corporate sector, it can't really do that. It can't be any surprise to the Democrats that Joe Manchin is taking the position he's taking and holding things up. They had lots of time to try to put enormous pressure on him. And one of the pressures they could have put on Manchin is something that a lot of the progressive economists are advocating. It's called a just transition. And essentially what it is you promise fossil fuel workers in states like West Virginia that you will not lose a penny of your wages if you have to either leave your job because as we phase out coal. If you go into another job, there'll be a big expansion of the sustainable energy industry, wind, solar, but it may not pay as much as you're making now. Well, we, the federal government, will subsidize the difference. So you won't lose any money. That's a message. How does Joe Manchin counter that? Because then they're going to say, well, Manchin is, of course, he doesn't like this idea because he's got money, his own investments in coal. He's a front man for the coal industry. But we're going to make sure you don't lose a penny, fossil fuel workers. And you got to know, eventually, coal is going to get phased out. So why don't we prepare for it now in a way that you don't lose any money? An economist named Bob Poland, he priced this out. If every fossil fuel worker in the United States and some of the associated jobs like restaurants that service fossil fuel workers, if every single one of them was subsidized in the way I'm talking about for 3 years, it would only cost around $2 billion. Like it's for a federal budget, that's not even lunch money. So extend that out 6 years, 9 years. Well, one Ford class aircraft carrier is going to cost about $14 billion. They're building like a dozen of these things. And even the neocons, the right-wingers, are saying, these are actually useless because both the Russians and the Chinese have missiles now that can knock these things out of the water in a snap. It's actually pointless building these things other than the fact that the military-industrial complex is going to make a fortune building these things. And go look at who owns the companies that are building the aircraft carriers. Oh, Wall Street. It's the same financial institutions. So that's the problem with the Democratic. That's the real underlying problem here.
But Paul, this is not what people were debating. People were debating, McLaughlin's, diminishing the role of parents in what their children going to study, connecting it to the race theory. So issues which you're talking about did not become the part of the conversation, which you're saying is the failure of the Democratic Party. But yes. Do you think the Republicans were more clear about their messaging?
I don't know if they were more clear, but the messaging of McAuliffe, first of all, he said this stupid thing about schools. Parents shouldn't have anything to say about what their kids learn. I mean, that's just stupid. But these are secondary. These become to the fore when you don't have a primary message that actually resonates with the majority of the voters. And I'm saying if McAuliffe had run as the climate change guy, although I don't know, why was he the candidate anyway? Because who does McAuliffe actually believe in anything? I mean, I doubt it. He believes in getting elected and power. So he was the wrong candidate in the first place. And in terms of 2022, in terms of 2024, the candidate of the Democrats needs to be about climate. A progressive message, yeah, but maybe not even, it doesn't need a Green New Deal envelope, which might also kind of alienate some of these voters. But it does need to focus on what are effective measures for dealing with this coming apocalypse, this catastrophe. And Republicans, if you look at the polling numbers and even amongst evangelicals, they do care that their kids aren't going to have a planet to grow up in. If that had been McAuliffe's primary message, and then he could have been smarter on the other issues. I'm not saying you can ignore them. But, this issue of, explicit sexual messaging in schools compared to the end of human civilization, but you got to make that argument. Obama never made the argument. Even Biden, he talks about it. When you look at his policies, they're so wishy-washy. The argument he makes just falls apart.
The governor-elect did not quite wholeheartedly embrace the former President Trump. Do you think this will give some idea and some freedom to some Republicans that they will have a future instead of being just in the pocket of the former president?
Yeah, I think Trump's very happy with the come of this election. But I think it's very important to understand that it's not really about Trump. I mean, he's an important player in this. But Trump is a vehicle for a lot of forces on the far right, including forces which I would describe as real fascist forces. But this social base that supports Trump, both in terms of the billionaires and amongst the working class and professional classes, that social base really emerged after World War II. They're to a large extent created by Cold War propaganda, sections of the population that think their interests lie in a powerful America, a dominant America, America, the superpower of the world. There's always some existential enemy out there, whether it's the Soviet Union or now Russia or China. That identity really comes to form with Barry Goldwater, and then it really breaks through with Ronald Reagan. And if you look at the Reagan campaign and then the Trump campaign is a mirror, a replica of the Reagan campaign. So there's nothing new in this about Trump. That right-wing social base, an identity based on, to some extent, or I should say a large extent, white privilege, which goes right back to how, why did poor white farmers and workers fight and willing to die in the Civil War to defend a slave system that they didn't even benefit from? They were too poor to own slaves. They had an identity that said, oh, well, at least I'm not them. I'm white, at least I'm not a slave. That kind of identity. But that said, people that identify that way, that have that kind of mentality, a significant number are opening their minds on the climate issue.
Thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime.
Back to you, Samana.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.